Hello, welcome back. Today, I'm going to talk about brain development. Now, you as an adult might be learning some new skills and your dendrites are growing new branches, but your brain as a whole probably didn't grow much today. However, your 1 year old child's brain is growing a lot. Before we get too far into brain development, I want to congratulate all of you because you're all lotto winners. Yes, it took a specific sperm, and there's millions of sperm, and a specific ovum to bring you into the world. So your odds of being here are just like winning the lottery. So the first part of brain development is actually in prenatal development or pregnancy. Now, normally a pregnancy lasts about 266 days, and it's divided into three stages. We've got the germinal stage, which is the first 2 weeks, then the embryonic stage, that's the third through the eighth week, and then the rest of the pregnancy, which we call the fetal stage. So, from the time of conception to actually implanting on the uterus, this takes about 2 weeks. We call it the germinal stage. And this is where the blastocyst actually becomes an embryo, and the umbilical cord and the placenta start to develop. Also, what's happening is the nervous system begins to form. From implantation to about 2 months, this is what we call the embryonic stage. And this is where major organ systems develop. And it starts with the head and goes out through the body. This is what we call the cephalocaudal. And then we've also got the proximodistal, where the legs and arms develop after the head and body. Heart starts beating, and at about the seventh week, sex organs differentiate. In the embryonic stage, the nervous system begins to form, and we call this neurulation phase, with the neural tube that surrounds a fluid filled cavity. Now, as this tube enlarges, it differentiates into the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. Now, we actually have our first muscle movement at about 7.5 weeks. So we still don't have any sensory organs, but we can move before we can sense. So next is the fetal stage, and this is about the last 7 months of the pregnancy. So at the end of neurulation, the neurotube now has ventricles, and as you can see, the brain continues to grow and take shape. So we produce new cells, and this is what we call proliferation. Now, some cells called stem cells remain and they continue to divide, but other cells migrate to other parts of the nervous system. There's two types of migration. The first is radial migration, and this occurs when neurons are guided by radial glial cells to migrate towards the surface of the brain. Now, the next type is tangential migration, and this occurs when neurons move to the surface of the central nervous system. By the end of migration, neurons are aligned in such a manner that enables them to acquire specific functions, interact with other neurons, and eventually give rise to neural circuits that make up the human nervous system. And this whole process is known as aggregation. So, only about half of the neurons formed in early childhood actually make it to the adult brain because we have what's called neuron death. And it's typically categorized as apoptosis or necrosis. Now, apoptosis is a natural process and it's active with programmed cell death to maintain appropriate development. Now, necrosis, this is not accidental, This happens when we have environmental toxins or some type of oxygen deprivation. So we've had all these processes going on and we're still pregnant, but we're going to give birth to this new beautiful baby that's going to weigh somewhere between 5.5 and 9.5 pounds. And all these processes are going to continue after birth. Human beings are born with about 100 million neurons, with a very high percentage of those in the brain. Now, the human brain weighs about 3/4 of a pound at birth, but it's going to weigh about 2 pounds at 1 year of age. So the brain's about 25% of the adult brain at birth, 50% at 6 months, 75% at about 2.5 years, and it's going to be about 90% at 5 years, and then about 95% at 10 years. Now, we've talked a lot about myelination, and myelination is not complete at birth, but this is part of this maturation process during the first year, and it's going to lead to crawling and walking. And then myelination continues into the second decade of life. So, you've all heard about the nature versus nurture, and neurons grow naturally. That's the nature part. But environment and caregivers will help grow more neurons in children, and that's the nurture part. So a cell will differentiate into a neuron. This is what we call differentiation, and it begins to form the dendrites, axon, and synapses. Now, the formation of the synapses is what we call synaptogenesis. Genesis being the beginning, obviously. So, and then later, the myelination starts as glial produces and insulates the axons. So let's talk about the senses. Now, babies are born nearsighted with the retina and the optic nerve not fully developed. Babies can see at best about 7 to 9 inches, but this dramatically improves by about 2 months. By 4 months, the infant can actually see colors. Now, hearing is fully developed at birth and even before birth. So, before birth, a child can actually respond to loudness and pitch. So, while you're pregnant, sing with your baby. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Taste, smell, and touch are all fully developed at birth, and the infants tend to know the smell of their mother. Now, touch is very important to infants because that's how they explore their world. So remember, at about 5 years old, the child has about 90% of the adult brain. And so at this point, this is completion of the myelination of neural pathways from the cerebellum to the cerebral cortex, and it can enhance the fine motor skills, the ability to play sports, play an instrument, or write, and as well as balance and coordination. So if part of the brain gets damaged, we have what we call brain plasticity. And so we have specialized areas that can change when needed to. And so just because there's damage, a person can live a normal life due to brain plasticity. However, this is greatest within the first couple years of life and gradually declines. So can we grow new neurons as an adult? It was once thought that we couldn't, but now we actually have a term called adult neurogenesis, and there's been some research that shows that this does appear to happen in the subventricular zone of the lateral ventricles and the subgranular zone in the hippocampus. I hope you enjoyed this video on brain development, and I hope you really understand the importance of prenatal brain development, child brain development, adult brain development. And so take care of your brain, keep it safe, and keep exercising. Thank you so much.